Example 1 of 3 for task 4A, a comparison-focused analysis. In this example, the arguments both have definite conclusions, the conclusions being identical to each other. The word count for the analytical paragraph only is 271 words. And by analytical paragraph, I'm talking about the one where you start off with your claim of a comparison or contrast, provide your evidence, and then elaborate on the use of your evidence to justify your claim in your first sentence. This is not part of the word count, though it is an important step for getting full credit for your outcomes. Performance, this is a very good to outstanding. You'll notice that in the other examples for a comparison-focused analysis, the word count is higher. Keep in mind that the number itself doesn't necessarily guarantee a certain grade. So just because somebody has 371 words versus 270 words does not guarantee that the grade will be 92.5. In fact, it could get an F. It depends on what you're doing with the words with respect to the instructions, the video coaching that I've given thus far in this task folder, and of course what is stated in the rubric. Remember that, keep in mind that none of the examples include step 1 content from page 2 of the assignment document for task 4A. It does not include content I tell you in a video to include between step 1 and step 2 of page 2 of the step 1 task 4A document. Does not include content I tell you in a video to include between step 2 and step 3 in the page 2 on page 2 for the task 4A step 1 document. And it definitely does not include content I tell you to include in the written and video-based instructions for task 4B. So task 4B tells you about an additional paragraph you need to have here. In the past, I've had students do an analytical paragraph that focuses on a comparison, then one that focuses on a contrast, and then do a question contextualization and generation paragraph. So there used to be 3 main paragraphs in this piece of discussion, and now it's only 2. But just keep in mind that for any of the examples, whether it's for comparison-focused examples or contrast-focused examples, that they are incomplete in terms of the assignment as a whole. And you should know what I'm referring to with steps here in virtue of having read the step 1 document assignment for task 4A and in virtue of having worked through the videos as well. So what I want you to do is I want you to have your notes and the step 1 document for task 4A out and to reference it as I mention it. Perhaps you might want to look at it again, and we're going to be focusing on page 2 of that assignment document. So as you can see, my example goes straight to step 2 and does not include the missing requirement that you're supposed to have between step 2 and step 3. So remember, you're supposed to have some standalone sentences that transition from the quoted original responses to your discussion of the responses per the expectations on page 2 of the assignment document. So that said, here is the first example, and what I want you to keep in mind is that as I'm reading your analysis and defending your claim that you have evidence of a comparison or contrast, that I do look back at the original arguments to make sure that you accurately quote yourself and your peer, and to make sure that you don't distort your peer or yourself when discussing the claims that you pull from or extract from your original arguments. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to visually highlight to you how this paragraph reflects conformity to the expectations. And one thing I want you to keep in mind is I'm going to give you lots of warnings, tips, maybe even another missing requirement is that I'm going to give you 3 very different examples of how you can do a comparison-focused analysis. So let's read through this together. And again, if you think you might need help with this assignment, do make sure you're taking notes and writing comments, writing things down that you don't see here in writing, but that I am iterating and highlighting. Okay, so I would like for you as an additional requirement to bold your first sentence in your paragraph that's doing the objective analysis. So here you can see they've bolded the first sentence. They say one thing we have in common. So I know this is going to be a comparison-focused response. To use the word in common is to say compare, similar, alike. Those are all words that you could use instead of in common, but of course you'd have to change the surrounding words for the syntax to make sense, or that would likely be the case. So one thing we have in common, notice first person, we Okay, always use we, our, you, me, I. Okay, don't use each other's names in here. Just the pronouns. You can use your names if you want to help me keep track of what you're saying, in the sense that you could say, I, Susan stated, or I, Daphne stated, you, Teresa stated. That actually is very helpful, and I would appreciate it if you did it. So you can use I and you, but when presenting the quoted evidence at first, you should tell me, make it very clear whose quote you're giving me. So that would be extra helpful. So here it says, I cited as a definition for truth the following from Merriam-Webster. Oh, sorry. Let me finish reading this. One thing we have in common has to do with our definitions for truth and how we use keywords from within said definitions and the other reasons we provided for our identical conclusions. Okay, so this reminds me of another warning that I need to give you that actually goes with page 2 of the assignment document from step 1. And that is that I don't want you to focus on things like we both offered an argument by definition, because those were the instructions. That's what you were supposed to do. So I don't want you to claim that as your similarity. I shouldn't say we both have in common that we offered an argument by definition. That's just following the instructions. So that's not really focusing on what I want. So it's taken for granted that you did the assignment correctly. And if you did, you offered an argument by definition. So then what you want to focus on, if you want to focus on your definitions, is that. So were your definitions the same? Were they different? Was there an overlap? What were the differences? Were they exactly the same? If they were exactly the same, that doesn't mean you use them in exactly the same way. There are at least tiny nuances, slight differences that you might have, but you can still focus on the fact that you use the same definition. In fact, if you use the same definition, but you used it in totally different ways, you're probably going to really want to you want to create a contrast-focused analysis. So you could say something like, while we have the same definition, I'm going to focus on a difference, that is in terms of how we use our definitions. Now, if you have the same definition and you use the definitions in a very similar way, then yes, you can focus on your analysis as being that of a comparison-based objective analysis, given the same definitions that you used in a very similar way in the other statements supporting your conclusion. However, if you have the same definitions, but you use them differently, very differently in the sentences that follow, then you want to focus on a paragraph that is contrast-focused. Okay, so whenever you're doing contrast or comparison, that doesn't mean that there won't be some. So if you're doing comparison, yes, you'll probably still note some differences, or there will be differences, but the purpose is to focus on what's similar, to make the case of similarity. Yes, when you're doing contrast-focused analysis, there might be some similarities, but the focus is overall in pointing out how something is contrasted or different. Let's go ahead to work through this video. So here, from page 2 of the assignment document, going to step 3A, you see that they have followed the instructions here. I know exactly what the topic of the paragraph is. I know they're going to do a comparison-focused paragraph, right? And I know that I even know the gist of what they're going to focus on. So in the first sentence, you can give me the gist of what you're going to focus on when it comes to either a commonality, a comparison, or a contrast. But you should not start discussing it within that first sentence, but you can give me the gist. If you wanted to just say, I'm going to focus on something we have in common in this paragraph, period. Or I'm going to defend my assessment or I'm going to defend the claim that we have something in common, period. That would be fine too. You can keep it that short. Here, the example shows how you can provide the gist of your commonality in the first sentence. So not only do I know that the student's going to focus on a comparison, but I know what the nature of the comparison is that they're going to be focusing on. Now, so that's step 3A. Well done. So I think I'm going to switch over to a Word version of this so I can highlight this for you. Hold on. Okay, so I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight. Let's see if I can make this work. Okay, so I'm visually highlighting in green step 3A of this part of this assignment. Okay, so that's step 3A has been met from page 2 of the assignment document. Then you can see they have a good introductory clause. I cited as a definition for truth the following from Merriam-Webster. Now, if you're going to quote a peer's definition quote, then you have to do two things. You have to use regular quotation marks. Okay, that's kind of hard to see here. Let's see if I can zoom in on that. You have to use regular quotation marks, but then to show you're quoting a quote, you use a single punctuation mark right there. Do you see that? So if you're quoting your own quote of a definition and you're quoting a student quote of a definition, then you need to use regular quotation marks followed by that single mark right there. And then I don't know why, but sometimes students don't do the closing quotation mark, but make sure that you do the same. Now here, this is incorrect, so you can correct it on your example. Oh, wait a minute. No, it is correct. I'm at the wrong place. So then when you close that, when you're quoting a quoted statement, then you do that single mark right there and then regular quotation mark. So I iterate. If you're quoting yourself quoting something or quoting your peer quoting something, including the definition or any external source, you need to make sure that you punctuate according to academic protocol. And that what I just went over is academic protocol. Some of you already knew this, but some of us are in high school. Some of us have been out of school or college or high school and are just now returning. So I've got to make sure that everyone knows what proper protocol is. And yes, I do expect you to follow this. Okay, so then you can see they make clear that they're quoting from themselves. I think it would be very cool if they said I and then their name, right? So I, who's speaking here? We don't know because I didn't use names here. But I would have liked it if when presenting the quoted material, they had used their name. So I would appreciate it if you did that. So I would say I, Susan, comma, cited. And then if they said you, comma, Chelsea, comma, cited. And then after that, don't worry about mentioning names after that. Just say I and you. All right, so you can see they have an introductory clause to the quoted quotation. And then here they have another sentence with the quoted material. You cited from the following, from the same dictionary, and then the quoted quotation. All right, so as you can see, they are following exactly the instructions given for the setup of their discussion. So I'm going to highlight this part. So this is step 3B of page 2 of the assignment document. And I'm going to highlight this part in yellow. Well, do I want to do yellow? I'll do blue. Okay. All right. Then the rest of this is step 3C. And remember in a previous video, I said this is where most of the intellectual work occurs, right? Look at how much discussion, elaboration, justification is required to defend the claim that what they have in blue really is evidence of what they have in green. And that's the way I want you to look at this. If you like, you can highlight the different parts of your paragraph to make it just that much more explicit that you made the proper moves. So again, you have your step 3A claim of a similarity or difference, contrast, or comparison. Here it's a comparison. Immediately followed by the quotes that will be used, immediately followed with sentences that justify the claim that the blue part really just support the green part. I hope that makes sense. Now, notice that there are words highlighted in yellow. I do not want you to highlight words that are not already highlighted in the original responses. Okay? So don't unhighlight, do not de-highlight or unhighlight stuff that's already highlighted by your peer, right? But don't add any highlight to original statements that don't have any. At the same time, here, what do I have here? Why is this stuff in quotes? Okay, actually, I'm going to take that back. Let's see what we have here. So yes, I'm going to take that back. So I think in this, I forgot what I was doing in this example. Here, you can, if you want to, if you're doing an argument from definition, if you're going to focus on the fact that you have the same definition and you use the definitions in the same way or a different way, if you're doing a contrast-focused paragraph, you actually can highlight words if they are words from one or both definitions that you're talking about in your respective arguments. So I hope that makes sense. So you'll see here that the words all highlighted are in one or more of the definitions. And so this is just making it visually explicit what it is they're doing. Look at how many sentences they use to unpack the quoted material. Okay, there's a lot here. Compare the discussion and interpretation with respect to the quoted material with respect to the claim that is being defended in green. Okay, so I'm not going to read through the rest of this, but I am, well, am I? Yes, let me read through at least. I'm going to read through this example. I might not read through examples 2 and 3, though I am going to highlight certain things about them in different videos, but I will read through this one. See, as you can see, isn't that a nice introductory clause? Notice how it's in first person, it's friendly, but it's still professional. As you can see, we both chose definitions making use of fundamental and powerful concepts named by the following words: fact and reality in my definition, and real and facts in your definition. As such, another nice introductory clause. This is actually a kind of a minor conclusion, if you will. We can see that when it comes to the concept of truth, and this is a minor conclusion as well, but they both support what's going on in blue and then green. We can see that when it comes to the concept of truth, we both thought it important to choose a definition that connects the concept of a fact to reality and vice versa. I go on in my reasoning to claim that obtaining facts. So now what they're doing is, even though they're focused on the comparison using that quoted evidence, now what they're doing is they're saying, here is how I used those concepts that we have in common in our definitions and my reasoning, right? So they're unpacking it some more. I go on in my reasoning to claim that obtaining facts about masks requires research and experiments. In a similar manner, you go on in your premises to claim that obtaining facts about the mask can be achieved through the power of observation and comparison of data collected about mask and the spread of the virus. So while they might have used facts with respect to with a different emphasis, what is still relevant to the comparison here is that she's showing, hey, we both use the word facts in our reasoning. Not only did our definitions have the word fact or some version of the word fact in it, but we actually pulled from that definition explicitly and used the word fact from the definition. So again, even though there's a difference in terms of how they might have constructed a sentence with the word fact in it, what the reason why this is still a paragraph that is focused on a similarity is because the student is showing that they both used the word fact from the definition in the reasoning that follows their definition. Okay, so going on, so then she says, in a similar manner, so even then, it is actually used in a similar manner in this instance. You go on in your premises to claim that obtaining facts, okay, I think I already read this, but just in case, can be achieved through the power of observation and comparison of data collected about masks and the spread of the virus. Just as we also make explicit use of the term fact, this is a lovely introductory, well, actually this is a lovely, what I call a transitional clause. Just as we make explicit use of the term fact in our reasoning, we also, so that the transitional clause ends here, then the speaker's letting us know that they're about to focus on something else, or in addition to, or just something else. We also share the similarity of making explicit use of reality or real in our reasoning. That is a lovely transitional sentence there. In my last premise, I imply that our ability to get a true take on reality requires evidence and argument. In one of your premises, you connect the concept of the real to understanding what is going on with the virus and wearing masks. So notice here that this is all discussion. It involves interpretation, objective analysis, reading comprehension. Keep in mind that anything you say must be compelling. It must be believable based on the evidence you present in blue, and it cannot distort anything when you consider the context of each of the claims and the whole of the arguments that are coming out. You can refer to other parts of the argument. It's just that you've got to make sure that whatever you're referring to in other parts of the argument help you to make the claim for whatever you have in blue here and whatever you have in green here. So step 2 and step 3. So I should not see a bunch of, I should be careful if you're doing this kind of a comparison focus, like you're going to focus like on the definitions and how you use them. Make sure that there's no to very little quoting here, right? You can put it around the words that you're talking about, but here you should be discussing, interpreting, paraphrasing. All right, so the example videos for the other two will be shorter. This one just had a lot of introductory information and some additional warnings, tips, and requirements for your response that I won't repeat in the other example videos.